Alright, this is going to be a good one. This is a brand new build. They poured this square in the floor, and the goal for this job is to bury this saw blade in clear epoxy and then fill the rest of this room with 3 colors of metallic epoxy. This video is sponsored by Dewalt. The bottom of this hole that they poured is nowhere close to being flat, so the first thing we're going to do is pour a self-leveling overlay. We also need to raise the bottom of this about 3/4 of an inch so we don't have to use so much clear epoxy on top of this blade. We're also grinding and shot blasting the concrete in this room to prep for our epoxy floor. And once we get the room prepped and cleaned, we're ready to pour the vapor barrier epoxy. This is a new build, so we know that they have plastic under this concrete, so a vapor barrier probably isn't necessary, but we're doing it anyways because sometimes when a floor has been troweled really hard and it's really smooth, the moisture has a hard time completely evaporating out of the concrete. So we're using a vapor barrier primer just as a precaution since this concrete isn't that old. We're going to let that cure overnight and we'll be back tomorrow to pour the metallic epoxy floor. Today we're mixing 3 different colors on this floor, brown, black, and silver, and we're going to manipulate the material on the floor. I love and hate this process at the same time. It's a lot of fun to pour this all over the place and just try to make it look good. But it's also really stressful waiting for the customer to see this, and we're just hoping that they're going to like what we did. My best advice for doing a project like this is to not overwork the material. I'm really just trying to spread the material enough so that each pile that we poured out is touching, and maybe blend it a little. And then we're just going to let the epoxy flow out and do the rest of the work for us. We're done for today, but we really won't know what the floor looks like until we get back tomorrow. Okay, we're back. The floor looks great, and we're here to potentially ruin this $10,000 of material that we just put on this floor. We're going to lay the saw blade in the hole there, and once we get it in the center of the square, we'll be ready to pour the deep pour epoxy. Truth be told, we were a little nervous to do this because if this doesn't work out, I'm not really sure what we will do to fix it. Got the first batch in and we have 5 or 6 more to go. We're going to use a torch to help pop some of the bubbles in the epoxy.
It's a little more challenging than I thought it was going to be because it's level to the edge right there, almost, but it's low on that corner and that corner.
So this square is definitely not level, so we are just pouring this slowly, trying to fill it as close to the top as we can. We're a little worried that a huge puddle is going to run out of the low side of this. So we stayed around for a couple of hours until we felt like it stopped moving, and we pulled our plastic and tape up because we didn't want it to get stuck under any of that clear epoxy. We're going to go home and come back tomorrow to see how it turned out. This was so discouraging when we walked in. I knew there was a chance of this happening, but I didn't think it would be this big of an area. The deep pour epoxy self-leveled and it flowed out of the low side of this square, which means that it created a little bit of a tripping hazard on the high side of this square. So we're going to need to sand down this excess, and then we're going to pour more deep pour epoxy on top of the saw blade to try to get it up to level with the floor. So the plan now is to build a dam around the saw blade with weather stripping. We're going to pour the deep pour epoxy on top of there, and then we'll come back tomorrow, remove the weather stripping, and then we'll sand it smooth to the rest of the floor. We have been debating on the order we should handle this part of the project. Should we put the blade in and covered it before we did the floor, or should we have done it after? Obviously we settled on doing this after because we've poured so many epoxy samples in our basement, and when we do that, we come back the next day and the epoxy is run off of the samples and all over the basement floor. So the idea was that the deep pour epoxy probably wouldn't self-level as bad as the metallic epoxy, so we were hoping that we could control it better by doing it this way, but maybe that was not the right way to go about it. Either way, we're trying to fix it, and the homeowner here knows that we've never done this. This was something he kind of threw on me at the last minute, and I didn't charge anything extra to do this. He knows that we're just trying to figure this out as we go. So we left that epoxy set over the weekend, and on Monday morning we got a call from the homeowner, and they told us that the material didn't seem to have set up at all. So we immediately knew something was wrong, so we sent a whole crew down there, knowing that we're going to have to clean sticky epoxy off the floor, and we just assumed there was something wrong with our mixing process. Epoxy is always mixed as 2 parts of A, which is called resin, to 1 part of B, which is called hardener. If you mess up how much B you put in the epoxy, sometimes it won't set up. So to me, it sounded like we messed up our mix, and that's why it was so wet. But when we got there, we noticed the epoxy hadn't set up at all. We were able to actually just squeegee it off of the floor and into trash bags. So we knew there was a major problem, and after going back and forth with the manufacturer a few times, they realized that they had actually sent us 2 parts of A, and the part B in the kits they sent were actually part A too. They were mislabeled. So This was never going to set up once we mixed it, and it was a complete disaster. But just so you know, I'm intentionally leaving out the name of the manufacturer. They figured out the issue and they owned up to the problem, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it straight. But the homeowner just didn't want to wait another week for the product to come in. Well, we're back to fix the saw blade. We're going to grind the edges down to make them flat to the rest of the floor instead of trying to fill the middle up. So we're doing that now. Our Dewalt battery powered tools have been great on this project. You've seen them a lot in this video, but here in particular, we are using our corded hand grinder with a battery powered HEPA vac. And the reason we're doing that is because we have another crew right next door to this building. They're prepping a garage floor for a vinyl flake system, and they're using all of our corded vacuums, so it was nice to have these tools to pull them out so that Troy and I can touch up this section while we're still making progress on the project next door. So once we got done grinding, we cleaned it up and we taped off a square around the saw blade. We applied the vapor barrier and let that set up overnight, and we came back and we did the metallic coat. We had some discussions with the homeowner about how to design this, but he ended up deciding that he just wanted a picture frame around the saw blade. So that's what we're going to go with. We try to do a similar design to the floor. We're going to let that cure overnight one more time. We're going to come back the next day. Since the epoxy is really old at this point, it's a couple weeks old, we decided to run a buffer over the entire floor. And on a side note, Dewalt actually saw this buffer and they sent me a brand new buffer, and it is way better than this old one. I didn't even know they made buffers. I'm looking forward to making a video in the future showing you the new one. But for now, we're going to use this old piece of junk buffer, and we're going to buff the floor to get it clean. We're going to wipe it down with acetone to get all the dust up, and then we're going to apply a urethane top coat, and this project will be done. I made a spreadsheet that shows you how much material you'll need on a job like this, and it also shows you how much money you can make. If you want more info about that, it'll be the first link in the description down below. And if you want to find more information about any of these Dewalt tools you've seen in this video, I'll leave a link for those in the description too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.